Welcome to the Vision Dev podcast, where entrepreneurs, innovators, and creators come to us to not only share their stories, but also their mindset, the strategies, and the tools behind their great accomplishments. My name is Leo Burnett. I'm the host of the podcast and co-founder of Vision Dev, a real estate investment company. And on the road to building our dream portfolio, I like to interview entrepreneurs and innovators and creatives to learn about their journeys, but also the way they think and the tips and tricks they've developed to be as successful as they are. To me, they're inspiration to become a better entrepreneur and be a better member of our community. If you have a call for the wild, and if you think something is wrong with the materialistic world we live in as modern Westerners, this episode is definitely for you. Jake Housdon is a high achiever. He's the definition of the guy being rewarded by society for being good in school, for being a good businessman, and being paid for it. But in his heart, he's passionate about nature, medicine, and spirituality. He worked for a few startups, had the big salaries, the important roles, but COVID came and it exacerbated his pain. He got sick and he decided to make a big move. That's when he decided to pursue his lifelong passion for the wild world and move to a small village in the Amazonian jungle of Peru, not too far from the Amazonian River itself, where he started a retreat center where you can do ayahuasca ceremonies or live amongst the community of digital nomads, fix your spirit, and be in communion with nature. Jake's an intense guy, full of creativity and love, and he tells us his story on how he overcame some of the wounds that modern society lay on many of us. He traded productivity for humility. He traded the modern world for a life connected to the earth. In this episode, we talk about the jungle philosophy. We talk about ayahuasca medicine. We discuss strategies for being true to yourself and live a better life. We're very lucky that Jake agreed to come out of his cave, so to speak, and chat with us. You're not going to want to miss this one. So Jake, I'm super excited to have you on the show. You have to give it to me. I've been persistent. I know you're very busy and you have like projects that are on a completely different vibration than what we're doing out here. And I'm glad you're taking the time to sit down with us and have a chat. I've been very excited about what you've been doing for the past few years. We've known each other in the business world. You've been an advisor to us in sales and marketing, and you're coming from the corporate world, but like you've made a big change in your life in the past few years. And I'd love you to explain a bit what's happening. Where are you right now, and what's this project of yours?
So first of all, thanks for your persistence, Leo. A good sales trait, right? That we always have to reinforce the positivity of, because we always feel bad for being persistent as people, right? And it leads to great outcomes a lot of the time. And it's just that like I'm moving on a different rhythm these days, like I'm really intentionally like not on the computer as much and like working in the garden and, immersing myself in like this new lifestyle. The first few years were quite a lot of transition and like new adventure, and that's destabilizing in a way too. I mean, that's the point, right? You're destabilizing what you had before to sort of reorient your life and do that in a new intention. So anyways, thanks for the persistence. And so I'm here in the Amazon jungle, in the Peruvian Amazon. So we're on the banks of the Ucayali River, which is a river that branches off from the Amazon River. The Amazon River is just further downstream, up near Iquitos. So Iquitos is a city in Peru that you could think of as the gateway to the jungle. In the north part, there's a lot more jungle in Peru. It moves down south too, but that's where people will fly into. You can only fly or take a boat to get there. There's no roads that connect it, to the rest of Peru. So it's almost like its own little jungle island, port town. And,
So are you
because the
inside the
Amazon,
Amazon basin?
we're essentially like upriver from that.
Okay.
But it's very close to us. Yeah. And Iquitos is positioned, where there's like a big kind of basin area and everything. And that's where ships will come in from various parts. So anyways, we are 4 to 5 plus hours journey away from Iquitos. So you take now a bus and then you can take a boat. You take a fast boat that will take you maybe 2.5 hours, or you could take an overnight slow boat where you put your hammock on the roof of the boat, actually, and then you cruise overnight. And that's the cheapest, like most economic way to travel that, say, like, your common person here with like the average means, if they wanted to travel, to a river town that was far from Iquitos, they would take the lancha, they call it. So it's like a big barge and those ships bring like everything deeper into the jungle that people need from like, your TV, they have TVs here, of course, to like, food, um, chickens and, beer and, gasoline and everything basically that doesn't come from here. And then equally, those boats are taking things from all the river towns out to Iquitos because there's so many products that are deeper in the forest like fruits and medicine and meat and fish. So, for example, the other day, a friend of Eric here, Eric's my partner in the business and like the head of operations of everything. So I call him the maestro de todo. So, like the master or the teacher of everything. So, one of his friends caught four of these huge fish called paichi, which are they look like sturgeons from up in Canada, like massive. Like they take like 3, 4 guys to like carry them in the water.
Mm.
So one guy caught four with his friend. And for people around here, they can't eat all of that meat. They try to sell it, but they'll ship that to like Iquitos, and that will be like a big payday for them because they got those four massive fish. So they're gonna prosper for like 2 months for their family after that. So anyway, that's just to kind of put in perspective a little bit of like the geography and
Yeah,
like
that's great.
things move
And I
in and
love it.
out, right? Yeah.
And how did you find this place?
So ever since I was really young, I've been into sort of like the mystical side of plants and this like spiritual dimension of plants. I always had a very deep connection to the wilderness and nature and almost like a little lucky sense about me. Like whenever I would be fishing or, in the bush with my dad, like in Ontario, or I would just like always end up having like really amazing luck with like big fish or just sort of like getting rewarded by the nature in some way, right? And always feeling really comfortable and just like loving it. Other people would be like there'll be like a swamp and like I want to go in the swamp and swim and look for stuff and catch the frogs and then I'll come out with like 5 leeches on me and I'll just like rip the leeches off and people and I'm like a little kid like having fun and people are like, oh, leeches, oh my God. So I
Yeah.
always like just felt the nature and the nature felt me and that was like always there. Also when I was really young, I don't know, for some reason saw my life evolving in this way where I knew at some point after I achieve like society's definition of success, I'll just go off into the wilderness or do something like mystical. And I was like pretty young, like I had no idea what that would be, but I just felt disenchanted, frankly, like
So
as
repeat that.
a
You were
soul.
so you were telling me
Yeah.
you've always had this goal of succeeding in the conventional world,
Hmm.
and then exiting into your more like personal world that's connected with nature, and so that's always been on your mind.
Yeah, that's been on my mind since really young. Like I
That's cool.
excelled in school very early, right? And I was like deemed to be gifted in grade 2, and they wanted me to like skip some grades. And my mom was a teacher, and she's like, "Wow, that won't be great for your like social development." So I was always on this like path of like trying to like because what happens is you get an identity from a young age then, right? Where you're like, cool, I get like big kudos and love from like my parents, the school, like my friends, like society by like doing really well in school and well on things, basically, right? And putting in a good effort, right? And I'm wired like that as a person. Like I have this ambitious, like builder's mindset, and I've had that since I was young. But also I like had that chip on my shoulder slash, received a lot of validation, right, externally to like orient me towards that a little bit too. And I just like always grappled with these two things inside me. One was like ambitious and business minded, like, I would walk into every store, even like as a kid, like a coffee shop, and I would like be like reimagining, like, oh, imagine they like did it like this and they made this bar shaped like this, and the customers could come here, and I knew I wanted to be in like business and running businesses. But then equally, I felt this part that's like wants to go in the wilderness and do a mystical thing. And I would do well in school, was interested in entrepreneurship, was great at writing, like went to business school, went that route. And got involved in startups like early on and everything. But then equally, I would be like doing like deep plant ceremonies or like ceremonies with cannabis, like in my apartment, like having these like deep, shamanic experiences and things like that. And even in like high school, when I was in like grade 9 or 10, I wanted to go to the Amazon and drink ayahuasca with the shamans and learn from them
You
and
knew what
stuff like that.
ayahuasca was from high school. Like
Yeah,
you
from
already
high
knew what
school.
that
Yeah.
was. Nice.
Yeah, I think from like Terrence McKenna or, someone like that just talking about it on YouTube. Um, so I always like grappled with these two identities, right? And that's a big central theme in like my story as like a human being and everything is that like I always had a foot firmly in both worlds, you know what I mean? And I always got along well with people that like they were fully deeply in each. But I identified as someone who's like, I don't know, there's like both parts of me, right? And I would wear that openly within like my small startup, like within my friends, my family. Like I was vocal and open and enthusiastic about, my interests in plant medicine and shamanism and the mystical side of life and, things like this.
And
But
did you feel
like
people were supportive?
some, but also like as a child, like it was very complicated for me, just in terms of like there's interfamilial dynamics. But like any mom or parent, right, is just obviously out of love trying to protect their kids. And a lot of times we see these stereotypical cases of people who perhaps use substances like cannabis or other things, right? We can say the word drug and then, we go over to all those things, right? Or um and my father had issues with alcoholism, right? So that was something that was a part of our family, like growing up. His mom, struggled with that. Like it's in other people in the family. You can see it. So my mom had a lot of this conflict in her own, marriage and in our family. And then
She
when you
was
see
being
your
protective.
son who's excited and like getting into cannabis and is like, wow, and is so like impassionate, passionate about it, like you can't help but see it like you need to pull him down from that because he's gonna go and become like his dad or that type of thing, right? And so that was like a big tricky theme that I ended up like kind of harboring a bunch of like shame eventually about like my own passions and like my own like heart's like mission in the world because also for me I saw the negative sides of the impact that all that stuff had on our family and everything. So I also didn't want to become like that and I would also keep like a skeptical eye on myself and like this, you know, sort of yeah, shame, right? That you think that you don't trust yourself fully, that part of you is gonna, go too far or something like this, right? I've reconciled all of that at this point, but it's taken a lot of like inner work and stuff to untangle, which aspects are of my own like love and, excitement and like passion and you could say purpose or in life, right? Mission, and which parts are, can be, do I need to be careful because it could result in something unhealthy or this kind of thing. So I dealt with a lot of this like inner conflict basically over my years. And all the while I was always a high achieving, like externally member of society. But at a certain point too in the startup world, like I reached that point of, severe kind of burnout and just disease, really like just like problems in the body and in my organs and, stuff like that eventually, right? From just kind of overdoing it and not having healthy habits as well to um, soothe myself or regulate my nervous system or all of
And
these
and
sorts of
perhaps
things,
not
right?
being true to yourself.
Exactly, not being true to myself. The thing is, like, everything you do is true to yourself for that moment in time, right? But then like eventually you're evolving and yeah, I had this disconnect between what my heart felt that it wanted to do and what I was actually, doing in life, basically. And through having like severe health scare and all of that, then I was like, okay, it's time to go, do what I've always wanted to do, which is like go way off into nature and learn about, all the mystical side of plants and the way they heal people and understand like more about spirituality and um, how these practitioners, help people to rebalance themselves and everything. So
So this calling became very loud when you started feeling ill about your life choices, and that kind of happened during COVID, right?
yeah,
That
so during
exacerbated
COVID,
probably this
big time.
yeah.
That was right around when um, I had gallstones in my gallbladder. I had to go to the hospital. I had like a stint put in. I was back out. Then I went to get the stint removed, and then all the same symptoms happen again, like extreme vomiting and like my skin turning jaundice and like getting an infection in the gallbladder because the stones can block the tube. That's what happens, the
Hmm.
biliary duct, right, where the bile flows from the liver down, um, and down further
Sounds
into the
sounds
intestines.
extremely
So it was
scary.
super, yeah, it was like no fun and really like gory and just like awful. And it happened like repeatedly, right? And that was when I was working at Dialogue. And I was working like super hard, and Dialogue was a great company, and I was working with great leaders and people I loved and stuff. Um, but I was also overdoing it still in work, and I didn't have a healthy setup, and even still like having these health issues. And then like I like healed up, and I just like went back in it, and like, and then I could feel how the stress of work was like not causing me to heal properly and stuff like that too. And I'm someone who does everything with like full heart and stuff. And um, I had reached a point where it just like I literally just felt like I couldn't continue. Like, just physically, mentally, spiritually, every aspect of it. Like because I was no longer like doing like my most awesome work or anything either eventually, right? Because
Hmm.
I just, was so out of it at that point.
I
So
it's
yeah,
kind of
I
a
knew I had to change.
it's kind of a recurring theme on this podcast, hearing people who turned entrepreneurs at a point in their life where um, they got too far and they were
Hmm.
starting to feel the pain of not making choices that were true to themselves or closer to their nature. And
Yep.
I'm curious to see what your point of view on that. But do you think you should have made these decisions earlier, or it happened like it happened, and that's how life is, and you're okay with it?
The latter, like for sure, 100%. I think that like it's just the archetypal pattern of how this stuff works. So Rumi, he has a great quote that says, "Through the wound, the light enters," right? And it's a really powerful imagery, right? Because boom, you get cut open and then boom, stuff comes inside, right? And the light comes inside, right? So I really see it that way. I mean, look, if you want to just you sort of not take it so spiritual, it's just like, yeah, problems beget solutions. Like no problem, no sale, no deal. Like, you know what I mean? No pain, no
Yeah.
no deal. Right? So it's like it's just like you need to reach the sufficient pain where the
Hmm.
consequences of the status quo are too stark for you to continue with your current decision set. Which is the same as like any sales deal or transaction or when someone mobilizes their resources to pursue like a better state for themselves, basically, right? So I think there's no other way, unfortunately. I think that you can like gain insight from other people that becomes part of your like operating system that can help you navigate in a way where you suffer less, basically. But I do think that like many of us in our life have at least one or, a couple good like moments where we really get
Inflection
like rough
moments.
and tumbled by life too. And that they're
Hmm.
kind of a little more like destruction is part of creation, right? And so
And you
it's
need
just has to
that
happen.
kind of friction, or you need that kind of that hard wall to actually make those decisions you need to make in life. And so they're actually a blessing somehow in disguise.
Totally. Yeah,
That's
exactly.
cool. So Um, Obviously, I know you were a high performing individual in the business world, and you've learned a lot of you've learned a craft doing that, and it serves you today. I see how you attract attention to what you're doing, and you're still really good at communicating and 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 having the positive attention that you deserve. So and we'll get onto that a little bit later because I'd love to hear you talk about marketing and sales. But I'd like to know, so what's that change that you've made? Now, you've told us where you are right now, but what's the broader context? Like what happened?
Yeah, yeah. Okay. So before I was working as a sales leader, I had worked in three different startups. The first one I joined was like a pre-revenue, situation where I was like a college kid, like who joined in my first year of university in business school. So I got involved like with my head in the game of like that world, like at that time, right? We weren't a full-blown, high performing company right away and stuff like that. But that's when I was in it, with my heart and mind and everything.
And that's
So,
Ulala.
that was Ulala. Yep. And I learned so much from those founders and I had an amazing like journey there, right? And I was there very, very long. And at a certain point it was of course time for me to move on. And I went and worked at another company that was an ed tech company. And then I went and worked at Dialogue, which was in the, healthcare, like mental health tech now, but telemedicine employee benefits and stuff. So I worked in SaaS environments, like helping with early stage sales teams, and on like the people side and the process side and all that stuff. So that was like my previous career path. And then after, I basically was like, I'm gonna go move to the middle of the Amazon jungle and learn to become a shaman and learn to hold space with, medicinal plants and help people to heal and stuff like that, right? So that
So
was the
live
huge
that dream
shift.
fully that you've always had. Like,
Yeah, go live it fully, like a full send, like boom, like move to the middle of the jungle to a small village where like, you know, go up to like a famous shaman, knock on his door and just be like, here I am, like I'm ready to like learn, That was like my vision.
was that your
And I
first
literally
was that your first interaction with ayahuasca and this world, or you had already been through that route before?
Yeah, so when I was 21, I think it was at the end of university, close to the end, like third year, I went to work with ayahuasca with my sister actually in the Cordillera Blanca, so in the Andes Mountains, but the north part in Peru. So actually in the mountains, not in the jungle, at a retreat center there. And we did four ceremonies. And we had a tobacco purge as well, jungle tobacco. It's called mapacho. It's a very potent spiritual teacher and healer here in the sort of toolkit of a medicine person. And we also had this tea from these different tree barks, which are a lot of the trees that now I've come to know here and stuff like that. So during that experience, I had a moment after one of the ceremonies in the mornings when you wake up, typically you form a circle and you share, right? What happened for you, right? And whatever you want to share. And that's a healing moment too, because you're around other people and your process is kind of being seen and you're saying things out to the group, right? So for me, that whole morning, I was just like, I had this huge like revelation type feeling where I just was like, wow, I finally see like what I want to do with my life. Like, oh my God, like this was meant for me all along. Like I see how it blends and I get chills now, like revisiting the emotion. Like I see how it blends like all of my eclectic interests together, like, the spiritual medicine side, but like the business side, like someone needs to make this place and like run it and, like design the buildings and like I've always loved like interior design and like artsy things and, you know,
So
gardening,
that's from your
landscaping,
first
permaculture.
trip. That's from your early 20s. You've had that vision
Yeah,
already.
yeah, yeah. Uh-huh. Yep. So 21. So, and then I basically um was like crying like a baby. Like I had so many tears and crying and my whole body was like into it. And it was because I felt so happy. I felt so much like joy and relief at like discovering this basically. And I was explaining to the group and talking, and I was just crying. I could hardly even like
Discovering your
articulate
true
like
calling.
words. Yeah, like something like that, right? Um, and then as it went, so that they named me too, the maestros, they named me like Niño Divino, so like divine child, during the whole retreat. Just like I got along really well with the medicine and stuff like that. And they told me the medicine is very fond of you. And I had work to do and I had my own purging. I had heavy stuff, but I would quickly get into this very like light space where I felt I was like interacting in the ceremony and trying to like help, even though I wasn't, qualified to be doing that or anything, but just like out of good vibes and heart and almost like putting in energy into the ceremony for the others and stuff. And so then the maestro invited me to be his apprentice then. And I like knew what was entailed in that, or I didn't know. You don't know, no one knows until they do it. But I had an idea that wasn't like a naive idea. And I was like, I'm not going to necessarily go live like a semi-ascetic like lifestyle right now as like a 21-year-old that just joined like the rocket ship new startup that's going to be the new Facebook on college campuses. And you know so my vision was like, okay, I'm gonna go like follow this ambitious path, and then I'm gonna like earn like a good amount of money, have like some big exit or something, or like I'll build my. And then after that I'll come and this will be what I do with all the cash and stuff. That was kind of my decision. And that's kind of how it played out, but like plus all the like hard parts and reaching that sort of like dark night of the soul, like rock bottom moment and all of that. um, so yeah, the seed
Looking
was planted then.
looking back at this decision you've made, my grandfather always said, if I was a millionaire, I'd go live in the woods. And
Yeah,
that idea, my dad repeated it to me a few times from my that saying from my grandfather, and it always stuck with me. I was like, why do we need to be a millionaire to go live in the woods? And
hmm,
that's what your thinking was as well. It's like going to the woods is gonna be like a reward for my hard work, or for like you need to deserve it to go to the woods somehow. Why do you think we need to deserve it, to deserve going to our true calling, or what's attracting us so hard? I have this attraction to nature that's very strong with me also. I love
yeah.
business. It's exciting, it's stimulating. You develop yourself quite quickly. But I also have this very strong calling to nature, and I'm wondering why we have this thought process all the time.
The deserving part.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you do not need to deserve it. Like I'm here to tell you, you do not need to deserve it. And we have accumulated an operating system in our consciousness as human beings where we tell ourselves that we need to deserve it, right? And that the only path that's meaningful is the hard path. And if you're not in discomfort, you're not growing and da, right? The thing is, morality is like a human thing. It's a mammal thing. We're mammals, right? That's something we shouldn't forget. And mammals are beings that live in groups, and their survival depends on living in a group, right? And so these mammals, like the thing that happens is we're okay, so
We
two
have
things.
this
So wait, I'm
urge to
gonna
belong.
we have an urge to belong. And as mammals, if one member of the group starts to show signs of weakness, which are like doing something like different than what they're supposed to be doing for the duties of, or kind of stepping outside the line, so to speak, then it's a built-in like evolutionary mechanism where the other mammals are supposed to act aggressive towards the other mammal so that it gets in line so that the whole safety of all of them and their kids is not, in jeopardy, right? So
Hmm.
if you show vulnerability, you're threatened that like we're gonna kick you out or like kill you or something, basically,
You're
right?
kind of acting like a weak link.
Yeah, so that's one
You're
dimension
a
that I
threat
think
to
is
the group.
important.
Huh, that's very interesting.
Yeah.
Never saw it this
So
way.
that's important. But the other thing is the reason I bring up mammals is morality, right? That's why there's morality. It's like you say, like, well, this is good to do, this isn't good to do, because we have a certain needs and therefore we assign value on decisions that allow for the well-being of the group and stuff like that. Now, what we need to understand is in our North American, Western, modern, paradigm and the way we view things, our consciousness, a lot of like us came from where Europe, right? Immigrants from Europe, Asia, everywhere now, but initially in the Americas, right? The Europeans came over. There was indigenous, right? People, Europeans have mixed with indigenous. There's conquest, there's dark sides to that. There's integration that happens. Now we have the Americas speaking mostly two languages. But the morality of the people who came here and their belief systems, who came to the Americas, was based a lot on religion and not even just religion. Um, Not to like demonize religion as a thing, but it was based on Christianity, right? And these ideals, and even the other big religions like of the book, Judaism, Islam, right? Where do they come from geographically, like planet wise? Like let's just go zoom way back, way back. We're like really primal beings, and we're in the desert. That's where we are. That's where it, came to be. And in the desert as a geography for survival as a human being is a place of scarcity, extreme scarcity, right? There's hardly any
Hmm.
water. You need to save the water you have. Look at how the animals are even built that live there. They have like water reserves like built into their freaking body, right? And also, if you don't follow the right routines and you don't ration the resources accordingly and you make the wrong decisions about what to do that day, you die, basically. And you die a fiery, burning death in the desert, right? And you see how, like, over time, as human beings gain sophistication and complexity, that idea of morality gets extrapolated to say, like, if you don't follow the rules, and you
You
don't
go
do
to
it what you need
hell.
to do, you go to hell and you burn, basically, right? And that, like, all of those religions have some form of the bad place happens to you if you're not in line, basically, right? Whereas, let's juxtapose with a different geography, the one where I am now, the Amazon jungle, right? People are here, there's indigenous tribes, there's still uncontacted tribes. These people are part of a forest ecosystem. They're mammals that live here. And the forest is an abundant place. Like there's fruits growing, there's trees, there's medicines. You can look within the square inches around you in the jungle and you'll find like the most biodiversity that you can find. So it's because of it being on the equator and with the sun and right, we have this crazy biodiversity and abundance. So that's not part of their belief system. That's not part of their consciousness, right? They don't say like there's all this scarcity and you need to, be careful about the moves you make or it's bad or something like that, right? And even with violence and things like that, they have a different relationship, a lot of these tribes and stuff, right? They're like warriors and things like that. And they like, view that that's like a normal part of like protecting, your family and that like if they look at how animals behave, they're, protect their loved ones too and just like that, right? Whereas we've taken the idea of violence and we made it like this, like it's only bad. Everything about it's bad. You know what I mean? But there's not. There's like a good side, like martial arts and protection and police and you know what I mean? The societal mammal needs, they need
Hmm.
to have some people who act like, hey, we could like make life miserable for you if you weren't following like what we think is best for all the families here that we have, right? So like,
Guardians. Yeah.
yeah, we've taken like things like indulgence, pleasure, and like violence, and like we put those things like into our shadow really big. Whereas here, they didn't do that as much. And so you can see extrapolating into the future, even mestizo people who have mixed with Spanish and they do have the Spanish consciousness and they're not as like suffering with the things that we're suffering with. You know what I mean? Like they're not. And so yeah, no, you don't need to deserve it, right? You have a operating system that is indicating to you that that's the case and is like making you actually not even reward yourself. So there is a reprogramming, there is a peeling back the layers, there's a
Hmm.
evolution required, right? To upgrade or to change your operating system, right? And that's a lot of this consciousness, inner work, and these things, right? Um, And even in those circles, it's so easy to again view it as this like, okay, but like I need to follow the right things and then, I'll achieve. And like I almost did that with this ayahuasquero maestro becoming like the shaman path. It's like that's a huge achievement and that's something I'll be seeing with my talents of finally and right. So there's this very like we can even supplant that operating system even when we're trying to free ourselves from this. It's just because it's what we know, it's how we like act. And I think it takes enough sort of repetitions and the winding road, like everything's like a pendulum, like you go a bit too far that way, then you recalibrate, and you just need to
Mhm.
pass go enough times to then, you know, integrate the wisdom that you're moving towards, right?
I'm
Um,
um I'm a lot more familiar with Eastern philosophy than I am with jungle philosophy, and I'd be curious if you don't have like any book to recommend for someone who'd like to get a glimpse of what is the
of the
philosophy of
jungle.
abundance, right? The philosophy of
Mm. A book. See, the interesting thing, I don't read very many books, but like honestly, my invitation would be go to the jungle, like and interact with the people
Mhm.
and like give yourself that experience and that you'll see it firsthand and that will like change your mindset. Um, there's different books I've read in the jungle, mostly about medicine work and things like that, which don't necessarily like explain, this kind of like dimension that I'm talking about. But I think it's just something you can observe from like various angles and perspectives, however you really interact with the jungle. Or even I would argue like the jungle, yes, but even through Latin America, a little more, there is this like they don't view productivity necessarily. This is a generalization, but overall, from my own experience, what I've found is that productivity is not as highly valued as the pursuit of pleasure or enjoyment, right? And so there's a lot more of an emphasis on like the present moment and the journey itself and the pleasure one derives from that rather than the achievements or the projected like plans or the efficiency really, right?
Mm.
And you can see it. I mean, there's a little more chaos, right? The chaos is cranked up a little bit then, right? Um, but and if you look at the jungle, there's chaos in the jungle, right? It's almost like really like wild and there's things everywhere and you might step here and then you just stepped in the house of, a certain ant that's, gonna sting you a lot now. And so there's
Did
also
you
that
get bit
dynamic
by a
here.
bullet
But
ant yet?
yeah, I don't know if a bullet ant, but I've gotten bit by ants that have like made my like on my face that have made my even though I'm not crying, like my eyes just start like my cry system is going because the pain's so strong, like right there,
Wow.
So maybe those are I don't know. But it's a bit like there's still a rhythm in the chaos. There still is an order that things follow and everything. It's
Hmm.
just it plays out differently and it's less forced, it's more flow. So your point about Eastern the Wu Wei concept, right? The sort of non-forceful way of action,
Hmm.
basically. That's ends up happening here kind of with a different flavor, just because the environment and being a hunter-gatherer based like bloodline and society, like that's just in you. And so you live a lot more day to day and things like that. But
That's
yeah,
interesting.
no
That
book
the
comes to
fact that
mind
they're
though.
hunter-gatherers probably do have a very large impact on the philosophy versus farmers.
100%. Agriculture
You,
changes your
yeah,
philosophy. You start to become more future oriented, right? Because
that's
you
it.
need to
Planning.
plan and do the right process and method to realize the crops,
That's
basically,
the
right?
big,
And
yeah, that seems
that's a
like
big difference.
a big contrast
It is.
to Western and Eastern philosophies if you compare it to the jungle philosophy. Or,
Yeah, Eastern is different in that like they somewhat demonize a little bit in my perspective, like indulgence and pleasure and things like that a little more. Like they're almost like, well, those things will cause you suffering and like you're just gonna like make your life harder by like feeling attached to anything. And
that's
whereas
it.
like I don't like I think that that is also leads to a very sort of dull, boring, life. Like I actually don't think that the goal of me in a human form is to essentially be a Buddha at all times, because I would rather do that in my like pure spirit consciousness form when I'm not like embodied
Mm-hmm.
as like human being right now, right? And so like to me, there's also like built into that a little bit of like, well, the key is just to have like pure bliss with no suffering and be in like a meditative state at all times. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and I think having that toolkit and understanding the path to getting yourself that clear and getting yourself that free of suffering for when you want to deploy that for yourself and for when that's appropriate and everything. But this was very hard for me, like, because I'm like a hardcore person who likes to like be extreme and like follow the path to the fullest. And so like that was a huge part for me
Perfectionist.
was, yeah, perfectionism and this like disciplined side of spirituality. And even that happened to me like with the ayahuasca, like because the path and the way it's viewed, and you're supposed to eat specific things and change your diet and what you do to prepare yourself to receive this medicine. But me, when I was young, I was enamored by that. And I took away from that, like, okay, so like the most like top spiritual way you can be is like essentially eat like as if you're like preparing for ayahuasca and stuff, because that means you're going to be like at like this peak like
Open.
state. Yeah, but
Letting
really
go.
like that's not a
Is
healthy way to live or be most of the time. And it's also like extremely restrictive. And it's for special moments when you're dieting to receive like a special medicine, right? It's not to live your whole life like that. But I struggled so much with allowing myself to even like experience joy or like indulge in something I like, or like hey, I feel like having a beer right now. Like I want to have a beer. Like that was like when I first got to the jungle, I would ask like everyone, I'd be like, wait, so like that shaman, like, does he drink? Like they're like, yeah, Jake, like every shaman drinks, like, they're like, what do you think? Like, and right, because I was like on this, like, well, no, like you need to be like this hardcore clean path. Like, you know what I mean? And that's like a way of not loving yourself for who you are and stuff like that too. Like
mm-hmm.
the jungle, that's another part of its wisdom. It's like you're an animal, don't forget.
It's the
Like you're a spiritual being connected to an animal, and
it's
you
it.
need to
So
honor your animal side, or else you're not very
so you're not
enlightened and altogether and integrated.
you're
Like,
not rejecting your inner animal as much in
no,
the jungle philosophy as
no.
you are in the Western philosophy or even Eastern philosophy. Like
In the Western, Eastern,
you
they're a
embrace
lot
it.
more. Here, they embrace it, and that's the shadow. That's what we put in the shadow of the West and East. It's like we put the animal side in the shadow. We said it's bad, go over there. We don't want to see you too much.
Hmm.
That's kind of bad. Not too much sex because no, and don't, da da da, and whatever, right? And that's like again, there is a truth in that one part of the truth. There are no truths. There are only half truths, right? And so you can take the good part of that seed, but don't forget the whole other side of the equation, right? And it's like here, people are louder, they'll dance more, they're not shy about that. Like they use their bodies more, they live in their bodies more. You know what I mean? Like, and that's what I found myself so disconnected from. And still to this day, I am like healing
You're
from and
struggling with.
changing myself. And now I'm like, boom, like in the garden in the mornings, like using my body again. Like I don't even want to be on the computer much. You know what I mean? Like it's like I I don't see it as like net positive anymore. I'm not an anti-tech guy. I love tech. I think tech is amazing. I freaking love it. I'm all for it,
But it
100%.
comes with a trap.
But I like to contrast it with a huge dose on the other side of nature, because as humans, our apparatus hasn't evolved enough, our nervous system, our biology, everything, and the technology evolved really quick. And now we're like these like monkey people who are smarter, but like we're still animals, and we're like using this stuff. Think about like Ayurveda. In Ayurveda, the, wisdom system of life, basically from India and before India, just the Indus Valley area and
Hmm.
everything. Like, they would, if you're going by their principles, Vata, so there's three doshas. Doshas are like your tendency towards imbalance in a person. There's Vata, Pitta, and Kapha. Vata is like air and ether. Ether is like spiritual. Air is like this loose moving air thing that's just air. We know what air is. So it's to do with creative and spiritual energy. And you know, people like me who have all these ideas and we talk and we get animated and things are coming in, we're all like that to a degree. Some are more than others, right? Some are more, they're grounded, the body's a little bigger, they're kind of slower moving. And we have endomorph, mesomorph, and ectomorph in the Western lens. That's kind of how we call the body types. They have this other way. Vata is like electricity energy. Computers generate so much Vata energy. The internet, it's like this airy Aquarius Vata networked thing of so many layers of information and overstimulation. If you're abiding by their principles, like they would probably say, like, look, like to restore your health and be in balance, like Leo, like use the computer like at max 1 hour per day, or like if you're really like Vata is overstimulated, like we need to bring it down to like once 1 to 2 hours per month to use the computer and internet, right? Like that ship has sailed for a lot of us. And or do we want to go back to that, or are we like we're not, we're evolving and we're in the crux of the evolution where we still haven't like our body didn't evolve for that reality yet. And some people's are, you see them, they're mostly ahead. The body's like skinny and frail and like disfigured from the computer chair. Like that's what happened to me and stuff, right? And so the bodies are changing eventually and they're going to start to, we're going to eventually evolve in some way, right? But we're not like that just yet, essentially, right? You know what I mean? And like, you go through so much suffering if you don't sort of have the right, like, you could call it detox, but it's just like cleaning and clearing away and getting back into nature and water and being in a river or a lake. And so the reason too we feel so drawn to that again is our DNA and our body knows that that's the solution for our ailments right now, and that we need to return to that. We
Mm-hmm.
don't even touch the earth with our feet like anymore, right? Like, you know what I mean? It's like we came from places like natural where we were like the people here, and then we learned things and we advanced and we evolved and we changed our consciousness and we became intelligent, and eventually we said, oh, that stuff over there, it's so dirty, I don't even want to touch it, and I'm just going to put shoes on and let's build a marble palace, and this is much more pristine and spiritual. And but it's like, because we separated, we said heaven, you go up to heaven, you go there. This place, it's not heaven. Like the indigenous, they're like, we're in heaven now, folks. They're like, this is it. Like, you're a keeper of this earth. This earth is a heaven. Let's enjoy the song of the earth and let's dance while we're here and let's take care of our heaven while we're here. Right. And so
It
like
it
we
really
created this
fits my
separation.
my I
Yeah.
really believe in the blue zones. I've
Yeah.
read a bit about them, and I think it's a very
It's
prime
data.
example of what the good life should be. And
Hmm.
what's a life adapted to our bodies, to our evolute, like the way we evolved. And it's being on your feet most of the day, working with your body, living in the moment a lot more than living in the future. So you're living a simpler life and a slower
Hmm.
life, and the community. Like you're not like independence and autonomy is so prized in our society for its efficiency and its productivity,
Yeah.
that we neglect interdependency a lot. And those blue zones communities, people depend on each other and they need each other, and they structured their village around helping each other. This guy does that and this guy does that, and they'll help each other when they need each other. And I think that's very healthy. And what you're describing with a closer to the hunter-gatherer lifestyle seems like exactly a blue zone type of lifestyle.
Dude, exactly nailed it. Like beautifully distilled insights. That's exactly what's going on
And
right
it's
now.
just about the environment. It's not even a philosophy. It's what's your environment.
It's just what you do and what your
It's like how
environment
do you
and
eat,
mhm.
and where do you live, with whom. Like it's not even how do you should you think or should you avoid thinking this way or talking. It's just a, an ecosystem in which you live that's healthy.
Yep. That's so wisely put. And to me, I see the future state of society as a return to that. However, with the benefits of a networked, like a network of communities. Like I see us regressing to almost a neo-tribal community-driven existence. And we already see that on the internet. That's what's emerging right now. And COVID accelerated it, right? Even more, poured gas on the fire. That's going to play out in physical, geographical reality, right? Soon you're like, where do I want to live? Like, I don't know. I've been suffering here in New York City, grinding like this. Like, I've always felt called to the woods. I want to go to Costa Rica and do a permaculture thing. And, I kind of want to do that, but that's like a huge lift to do on your own. And there's some pioneers who have done it and they're out there and they're creating community and right? And then, but eventually it's going to be these online communities. It's like, and I already know Leo and Cedric and Dabe and John, and we've been friends online for like 4 years. And like he makes good money. He's an investor in real estate. Like I've done well for myself. Like let's set up like a sick like community that's like, and the houses are going to be like pretty cool and like eco natural but pretty balling too. And and then there's like essential, like we have like a daycare because we have kids and we want to homeschool them now. We don't really believe in the system as much, but we're entrepreneurs. We're going to teach our kids like amazing things. They're going to travel, live these rich lives, and and then slowly we're going to recreate essentially what you just described, because we're all going to reach the consequences of the status quo, which we didn't fully all reach that yet. Some of us did, some people didn't. So eventually there's going to be like the early adopters, they're already on that, I would say, right? And the laggards and the all that, that's going to play out
And
over time.
it's gonna take a while. So you see, you've gone through the trials. You've gone through, you've used the medicine, and you've worked on your spirit because you know what's the baggage you're carrying from the society you came from, and that can take multiple generations to change. It's hard
Mhm.
to do in a lifetime. It's hard to get rid of this productivity mindset, and
And
um,
it's not all bad. Part of it's great. Like it's just tempering it and recalibrating and integrating, reintegrating it, right?
mhm. Yeah, and changing the environment again. Just putting
Yeah.
ourselves in a different environment can already alter a lot of that mindset. So
And community, you said,
what's your
right?
mission now? So
My mission.
you've moved to the jungle. Are you still finding yourself and taking the time to adjust to this new lifestyle before you really set on your mission, or have you already started? Like what's your goal now?
Yeah. So quickly on mission and purpose, my viewpoint on those is that they're like ephemeral things that continue to go in and out of sync with each other, like two sine waves, like one is mission and one is purpose. And then we have a line, like an x-axis that is like conscious, like if it's in the positive number, we're conscious of it. If it's below the axis, we're not conscious of it yet. I think you have a mission, it has a certain lifespan. And then when the mission goes down, you realize the purpose of what the mission was, because you can't realize the purpose already. And that's what we all try to do. We get super obsessed about like, what's my purpose? What's my true calling? And we waste so much time and energy trying to figure that out that we rob ourselves of a lot of like joy of the process and discovery and things like that, right? I did that a ton during my last few years. Like I like obsessed over like this, and like I would land on one thing and I'm like, oh, but like there's this other part of me that's not represented in that. Like that's not fully what I'm. It's also
So
this, and like,
you're not planning
and then
on turning
eventually,
into a missionary for this kind of new age lifestyle that
no,
you're just living
I
it.
mean, I'm just living it. I'm living in a flow state and I'm allowing what pours into me to be what I create. It's like, here's a vase with a plant. Let's let the light come in. Let's see what grows. That's how I'm living my life. Like I'm doing it at such a degree of alignment that I'm like just allowing it to emerge, and I start building that piece even when I don't fully see how it actually fully fits. And in doing that, I've like created at a faster speed. It could seem slower in some way, but I've like because it takes a lot of trust and faith. That's the hard part, right? But once you've seen enough evidence that when you act this way, everything goes out in your favor and everything, that's how I act now. And so it ends up being like not that linear at all of a path of building. It's much more like done out of like the heart and stuff like that. And I'm not saying like just follow your heart and nothing else and don't be practical. Like I'm a very practical like person as well, right? So I'm not just putting that message of like um but I am saying there's a flow you can go with. You can go with the flow and you can learn to do that in a way. And that's how I do things. Now, broadly, like I want to like uplift people, uplift the plants, right? Like I'm really big on nature, plants, and like humanity and like the bridge between those two and creativity, right? And helping people evolve their consciousness and helping support people through this shift that I've gone through, helping hold space for that. But the thing is, that all happened and is happening just because I'm also following like what my heart and soul wants to do and feels joy from and is excited by. You know what I mean? And then, and I find like too much, we try to put the force part on and the figure it out side and the, okay, cool, let's map this out. And we go early on that, like we push that too early. And we see that in entrepreneurship, right? And it's a balance. You have to do both. You have to juggle both. And I am juggling both and everything. But all that to say, like, um, yeah, I really want to help people to have the courage to create from their deepest level of their heart's desire and to like make their life reflect what their actual dream is and to get into this new state of consciousness where they rewrite like the rules of what they think is possible in their life and with the operating system that they have running and everything, right? And like the way I like to do that is like making a place in a wilderness part of nature that can facilitate community and hold space for people to be there and to go about their process and interact more with nature and kind of a little bit of what's happened in my own path, right? And just make that like more accessible for people. Like I'm definitely like the person who's like I'm happy to send it into the deep adventure and extreme thing to then be like, wow, I discovered this like amazing thing. Here, let me help build the scaffolding so that more people can come and enjoy and have that same, benefit that I've had or that same revelation or experience, right? I love that. Like being the adventurer person to go out into the unseen and uncharted and then okay, cool. Build a bit of a scaffolding and help more do that. I'm not fully only interested in just only pure adventure for myself forever, right? Right now, I feel I want way more of that. And that's what I'm doing. Tomorrow, I'm going into the jungle to spend 2 nights, right? With Eric. And we're going to be like deep, deep far away, right? We don't use a tent or anything, right? So, that kind of stuff and I want to keep doing that. But I'm like I have there's a side of me that really likes to build that bridge back for the other people and to bring and to help society and to be of service in that way, right? I get joy from that. It's not just because I think
Hmm.
that's what I need to do to
No,
be a
no,
big
it fills
star.
you.
And it's like,
It
yeah, that gets
yeah.
me happy.
So currently you have a retreat center where people can come and work remotely, like the people in the
Hmm.
background, right? And you
Yep.
also have a ayahuasca retreat center, or is it the same
Yep.
place?
Same place. Hmm.
And do people that come work there remotely all go through the ayahuasca ceremonies, or some they just come and stay in the jungle and that's their retreat, and some come for the ceremonies? It's like a bit of both.
So that evolved for me as I was discovering everything here and getting clarity on like again what feels the most like heart-centered for myself, right? And so we wouldn't mix the two in the sense of having people here who are here just working, and then at the same time having like 4 people who are, you know, drinking medicine and doing medicine work. We would like isolate the place for medicine work at that time so these 6 people are coming for 9 days of medicine work, and that's what's going on here for now, because you really want to honor the space and container that's required for that work. And ideally, you want everyone who's involved in that environment to be partaking in those
Hmm.
ceremonies together. Um, and you want to work with a certain team that's tight and stuff like that here too, right? Um, but so that's one thing that we do. So if you're listening to this and you want to do that, then that's something that's possible to do here, right? But on the other side, like what we have in April coming up is a nomad retreat. So nomadretreats.com. And the concept of a nomad retreat is that you go and do all the awesome parts of a retreat but you don't need to fully leave your whole work at home and abandon your entrepreneurial life at the same time. And in fact, one of the whole points of going is because there's going to be other cool founders and professionals and people that are also going to be working for a part of the day. So imagine you wake up, you drink tea with the sunrise. Like if you really want to go for a swim in the river, you do that. And then, it's deep work time, creative deep work focus, right? For like your 3 hours,
Hmm.
or maybe you're doing a podcast with Dabe or whatever, right? And you have all the jungle here and like Starlink and a beautiful house, and you're comfortable and protected from bugs and all those things. But then like in the afternoon after lunch, we're like, hey, let's go hike in the jungle and go to this really far place and fish in this river, and we'll find jaguar prints along the way maybe, and then like come back, and that's just like your afternoon, right? And so you're really getting this like deep, interesting integration of both. And you're around a cool community where that's the point of that community, is that they're people who celebrate both sides, right? And we seem to be calling this like the conscious way and stuff like that, right? But it's really just like people who get down with doing both those things, right? So
Hmm.
that's also something we're doing. And then increasingly I'm getting into like pure adventure jungle stuff. So like, you know, there's some people, they're the type like they really want to do like an 8-day adventure where they're like camping and like canoeing to different places, and they're like way off the beaten path, and it's like kind of hard and intense. That kind of thing too. We haven't set all that up yet, but I'm just kind of doing all the adventuring now to kind of outline all the stuff that I want to offer to on that.
So you're setting it up. You're setting yourself up to be a gateway to the jungle
Yeah, exactly. For a
for
few things.
outsiders
Hmm.
who wants to
Yep.
experience what it's like to live closer with
Yep.
nature and experience jungle. I'm
And the next one will be co-living too, Leo, just pure co-living. So like you don't want to come on a retreat. You just want to be here and do your own thing for like a month or 2 weeks. That's
mm,
the one that we're doing now. And that's what John's doing. Yeah.
beautiful.
Hmm.
Can't wait to come. It's like
Oh,
such a
dude, that
great
would be so cool.
opportunity. I sent you this podcast by Paul Rosalie from Jungle Keepers. Lex Friedman interviewed him last fall and or last earlier this year. Anyway, it was such a good episode. Lex Friedman was experiencing jungle for the first time and ayahuasca, and they were having the interview sitting in the middle of the forest, and you could hear like the nature around them. It's a super cool episode. You should listen to it. If you're not familiar with Paul Rosalie, you should check it out. And he also like done this switch in his life and decided to live in the jungle and actually protect it. That's his mission. And jungle keepers are raising money from around the world and investing this into buying more land to protect it. And
And what you just mentioned, that's something huge for me too, is like when I first got here, that's what I felt inspired to do, was to create a nursery of trees and start reforestation and everything. And then
nice.
after somewhat like not parting ways with the idea, but being like, wait, like I'm putting all this like pressure from a perspective of like external achievement and finding love outside myself for this become a ayahuasquero maestro path. Um, I actually just want to like plant plants and do agriculture and like work in the garden a lot. And that's in my most simple state, like as a child, like I love that. And that's what I want to do. And just the nature by itself with a capital N. Yes, the plants are part of that, the spiritual plants, the entheogenic plants, you know, and I love them, but it's like the whole nature thing itself and just the simplicity of trees in the earth and plants. That's what I currently, right now, today, feel most drawn to. And so my next steps on that are to buy a piece of land, another piece of land here. Eventually, we need two, one on one side of the river and one on the other side, because the elevation is different and we have species that need to be in both. And to plant like an agroforestry style, like medicine forest, like a forest, but that is strategically done to have a ton of medicinal plants and fruits and, um, essential oils that you can derive from the different tree barks. And um, so that's something that, is very near and dear to my heart. And the vision I have for creating these centers is like to let that be essential part of them is to like go to a place, find a piece of land that needs help, reforest it in an agroforestry style, and then build a retreat center on it, and then essentially build this like network of places that all embody this same kind of philosophy. And
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people are doing this in various different types of ways. Um, but yeah, found myself come like full circle back to the like that plain and simple desire to do that basically. And for the simplicity of what it is. Simplicity, you mentioned that word before. Like, I think that that's one of the main stressors of the current iteration of society for most modern people is just the complexity is too high. And things are easy, but they're like complex at the same time, you
Mm-hmm.
know? And that's a really weird recipe where you don't even have to do work to have your needs really met. And then things are also like kind of complicated in the mental realm. And so you don't even know what you want anymore. People don't even, they can't make a decision. That's what happened to me. I'm like, what do I want? Do I want that or do I want the one with cheese on it or the it's because we just become like disconnected from our like animalic desires again and stuff like that, right? So this simplicity thing, I've been really just feeling that ever since the ayahuasca retreat we had for our first guest here a while ago. After that, I just like all I wanted to do was drink tea and like be in the nature and like I was already doing those things, but I still had like this part of me from, and I feel really settled into that now. Like I want to like drink tea, like play the charango. It's like a guitar from the Andes here. Be in the garden, plant plants, bring people here, and just let it so that like what you said, like my life really becomes and the way I live it, it's a lot more of that blue zone way you were describing. Whereas now it's almost like a demi of that, but still I would be like, okay, mornings are like I'm dedicated to like my work online, like building audience and writing stuff and whereas now I'm almost like, how can I let that take like the minimum time like possible in my setup, you know? And like I don't care if I grow slower. Like I'm not trying to grow fast. Like I parted ways with that idea. Like the earth grows slow and so do I. You know what I mean? Like I'm operating on that, now. And it feels so good. And that's the path I want to follow is this simplicity, humility. That's what we lost. Like humility, human, humus, the root of the word. It's just wet earth. It's like the organic material, the wet earth. That's what the word means. And we forgot that that's what we are and what we came from and stuff. You know what I mean? And a big part of my message and who I am is like the return to that, but with integrated this like high spiritual wisdom and intelligence and how they're actually both the same thing. Like they actually both meet each other, and you need to be grounded and rooted in the earth to access the high spiritual intelligence. Like as far rooted as you are and grounded, that's as far as your antenna can reach up into the dimensions of thought and creativity and inspiration. Right. And so as an entrepreneur, that's also the right skill set. That's what you want. You want a mix of being grounded and stable enough and staying the course and being disciplined and not chasing every single butterfly, but also you want to be tuned in that like if the right butterfly flies by, you're like, that's the butterfly. We know it. We have to go like, and that's a really hard state to live in. And like, but again, it's not that they're in fighting. It's that the two feed each
See,
other, you
you're
know?
answering a question I was going to ask. I
Mhm.
was going to ask you, like, you have this very strong creative energy
Mhm.
inside of you. I can feel your excitement and your intensity about it, and I'm sure you have 1,000 new ideas every day.
I do. Yeah.
And some people have more butterflies flying around them than others, and you're clearly one of them that has a lot of them. And I'm like that too.
Mhm.
And I was going to ask you, like, how do you m- how do you get closer to the jungle lifestyle when you feel like pursuing so many good ideas and you're so excited about so many projects and you have this creative desire to make them happen and see them exist in reality, but at the same time, your goal is to live a simple life and closer to nature. And I found myself so many times locked up into all of these ideas and actually unable to live in the present moment. And I've built a cabin, like a log cabin in the woods, and the project got out of
Oh,
hands. And
cool.
I started building a whole bunch of different buildings, and it was I I I I got I learned a lot about myself during this project and how I have good ideas, but I can't follow them all. And the goal here is to actually select the best ones. And that's what you've answered by saying being better grounded allows me to know what I want. Being better grounded and more in the moment makes me feel better about what's the good path I should follow. So even though
Yes.
there's a lot of butterflies flying around me, I see the one that stands out better so I can
Yeah.
follow and pick the right ones. And that
Hmm.
requires headspace and enough headspace to feel to have more definition in what you're feeling about things.
Yeah, beautifully articulated. And it makes me think of your trunk, right? You can have many branches. You need to have a trunk and roots, right? That's how you can have many branches, right? But like we're like up in the branchy realm and we're just like throwing branches everywhere. And then we become like destabilized, right? And we can't execute, and I'm someone who I went in that a lot. Like I love to spend time in the imaginal realm. And so, but I was always able to execute and be an operator at the same time. I was one of those rare breeds that could kind of go pretty deep in both, right? However, was I executing at like the pure executor of the top of the world? No, like that because I don't want to be that person. That's not who I am. I
Mm-hmm.
executed it with the best of them, right? I mean, I can execute with the best of them. I know I can do that. It's not what I'm going for with my whole soul of like pure, da, 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 And so being rooted and grounded in your own emotion, your own darkness with the roots, like inside yourself, like knowing yourself at that depth and accepting every part of yourself and loving every part of yourself, that clarity that comes from that, that's what gives you an unshakable trunk that then, you can let the branch. So what I do now is like, but again, I struggled with this big time over the years, right? And so now, because like you said, I have a ton of butterflies flying around, right? And so I have very like earthy based practices for my creativity. So I will sit with tea and I will drink tea and I will only drink tea. And that's all I'm doing. And I'll want to write something when I'm drinking it, but I'm like, just wait, just drink like 7 cups of tea first. Like it's in a session. It's not like the little cups. And then like don't think, just drink, and then everything just starts emerging to me. All these creativity, all these ideas just come in,
But you don't write
and
them
I'm in
down.
like a flow state, not just yet because I want to start going a little deeper into that, but at some point I will, if it's my morning practice, because I do write in the morning. So I will then allow one that emerges if it feels compelling enough to my nervous system and my whole apparatus, like that excitement that, whoa, I will write it and I'll get it formed as much as I can in that moment. But I won't obsess over going way into the form side of things where, okay, and then that sentence there, and then, we got to change and edit that period. And or the execution, the planning and the branding and buying the domain right away. And sometimes I get off on one and stuff, and I'll let that if it all is aligning and flowing. But I let the like impulse come, I feel it, and then I write it down. And I write it down and I just put it. And that's like I planted a seed, right? And then I continue living. And that's like in nature, there's a natural selection. Like you're going to put out like 1,000 seeds and they're not all going to be the ones that you select or that grow into something and so like that's kind of how it is with ideas. Like it comes, I put it in the earth by writing it into something and sometimes sharing it out too. That's like great if you're on LinkedIn or social. And then I continue doing the same practice. And sure, at some point I outline priorities because something is like really come up all the time and it's all I can feel and all I want to do. Then, yeah, okay, that's clearly something. But what I used to do is I would let my excitement get so high for every little thing. And I still do, but like I don't go and I would have all these like, because I would use force then. Then I would take the idea, the stimulus is so there, I know it's the one. So then okay, cool, let's make it happen. Then comes the make it happen side. But the make it happen, that can it causes things to go awry a lot of times because
Mhm.
it's too forceful for that stage of its growth. It was just the seed of the idea right now. You don't take the seed and you're like, cool, let's make it into a tree, right? Like that's what we try to do essentially. And that's what we think we're supposed to do in entrepreneurship, right? We're like, okay, cool, execute. And whereas
So
again,
when
no,
you
not
get
everyone
so
says
when you
that.
get this
Yeah.
idea and you plant it, right? You
Yeah.
write it down. Will
Mhm.
you come back and water it? Like, are you shelving it somewhere you can come back to it, or you'll just forget about it. And if it comes back, it means it was a good idea. What's your process around this?
It's more that. So like I will I can't remember them all, right? Because there's just too many and stuff. So basically, I write them all down and then I have them in Google Docs. I used to do Evernote. I do Google Docs now. And then later, when the same stimulus comes up, like in the same thread of vision, then I already have like a semi-articulated version or like a three-quarters version or like these incredible ideas that I've sourced previously over like 3 years. You know what I mean? And I'm like, wow, I wrote like almost like half the like, oh, I want to make a course now about helping people with conscious cannabis. Oh, wait, I've already written like pretty much all of this. You know what I mean? I just need to like assemble it and sort of like bring it together. And there's some people, they intentionally do this with like content. Like they release the thing as a piece of writing, and then they use that as a litmus test, like a signal in the market, and they just keep doing that. And the ones that, right, and they're like, okay, cool, and then they select those more, and then they, and eventually they just build off of like building in public with the signal of the market, and just letting your writing and ideas be the bait that's out there getting tested in the waters every day, essentially, right? And your own excitement matters as much as the market. But again, you have to make things people want. So you do need to be testing with the market and stuff if you're trying to like do that, right? But for me, it's more like that. So right now, and I used to get torn with that because I would like want to do them all. But I did too forceful so many times that I realized like there's a time horizon. Like I seem to really be able to source these inspiration and ideas, and they're not meant for like right this second always and stuff. They're very like visionary and stuff sometimes, right? And so that's the very tricky part, is like taking a step
Knowing if it's
back
ready or not.
and
If
letting
knowing
time
if it's the
play
right
out.
time.
Exactly. And like I find I don't think my way through that. I just kind of feel it. And again, when I let joy be, not like, yeah, let's just eat cookies all day, that's joyful or something, but like joy, like my heart and what brings me like and gets me excited creatively, like that's what leads me to all the things that end up being the right things and everything, right? And I personally have a stomach now for the risk and whatever of it all. So I'm very happy to live in a pure flow of creativity kind of life,
Mhm.
right? And it's
Before we
a
get too
more
far
easy
off, like
way to
I
live.
I
Mhm.
I wanted to lead you into your what you post on LinkedIn.
Mhm.
You were talking about the way your ideas come and how your process of even testing the ideas by posting about them. So I'd like to get onto this topic because that's one thing that I find unique about you, and you're so good at writing posts and on
Mhm.
LinkedIn. Do you only
Thank
write
you.
on LinkedIn?
I do right now. I want to do Substack soon,
Okay.
because I think that Substack's an interesting community, and obviously they let you own the emails, and you can, message your people and make sure they read everything that you write. Whereas on LinkedIn, they can't find it all always, right?
So is this your main marketing strategy for attracting people towards your offerings? It's
At this point, yes, 100%. And that's not why I started it. Like I just was like I did a bit of posting when I was a sales leader because I was like, LinkedIn's cool. And I loved like Gary V and content, and like I'm a creative guy. And I was like, cool, like, yeah, I'm gonna get in this. But even then, I would do like just stuff that I was like passionate about or some kind of interesting new creative take or things like that. And then when I first got down here, eventually, once I finally bought the place, all that, I made one post. I was like, I recently moved to like the Amazon jungle and bought this retreat center, and this is where we are in the world. And people were like, wow, like they loved it, right? So then I was like, cool, like I'll do that more. And so then I shared more, and eventually I shared something where I like was like, oh, I left the rat race when I'm 28, and like here's how I did it, and I did this. I worked hard at startups for less than I was worth for a long time. Then I got, reputation, and I leveraged that, and da 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 da, and here's how I did it, um, and then that was viral like on LinkedIn, right? So I got like 330,000 impressions or something, and then I was like, holy
wow.
sh and then yeah, and then after that, everything I posted, because the algorithm like loved me, would just be like huge. But then I stopped. I just stopped posting because I didn't feel like it anymore. I was doing like inner stuff. I just didn't want to do that. Like, and you could say, like, if I kept going from then, sure, you could say, oh, it would be built up. So, but it wasn't my path to do that. And so I've always maintained that like I just write like what I actually want to write, and like I don't have much of an agenda. Of course, like sure, I want to share the life that I went off and created with people, and like sharing that will let me be seen by them. But honestly, the vibration that motivates me to post is just like the joy and excitement for something I discovered or learned, or helping myself be seen more, which is part of my own healing, because I used to carry shame for all these parts of myself too, like spirituality, plant medicine, shamanism, cannabis, right? There's a lot of judgment still that we cast on each other and on ourselves for being into some of these things. And it's a taboo subject in the business world, right? Stigmas and stereotypes. And so then that eventually became like, oh, cool, like that's a fun game and mission for me, is to like come out here and stick up for my own self and my previous self that used to be more scared about these things, and create the space for others as well. But all those things like evolved just from me doing, like creating what I wanted to make and stuff, right? And I took a very creativity driven approach, like letting that be like actually what my goal is. At a
Mm-hmm.
certain point, if you do want to like motivate people towards a certain way of helping them, and you have an offering and stuff, sure, like you ought to, speak to the problems and how you help them, and in comes like a slightly different strategy if that's your pure goal to optimize towards that. And there's people on
Mm-hmm.
LinkedIn, they're like, there's two types, like those who make money from LinkedIn and those who just post like inspirational shit for like likes and stuff, right? And they're kind of chirping that crowd, and they're saying, well, if you actually want to make money, you need to like, you know it's not about likes, but you're going to get the right information out that speaks to the pain points of the prospects and that, right? But like, I'm almost like, I don't know, I'm just trying to like create all this energy, and then let that just be enough by itself almost. And then I'm someone who's enough of a practitioner of like writing, marketing, all those things before that, like it's embedded in me enough to allow some of it to come through for the right moments. Of course, if like
Mm-hmm.
I need to put like I'm advertising a retreat, and like I need to sign people up, and so I need a call to action, and I need to, you know, but like I also find that like the angle I'm taking is like, just by being myself, it's so disruptive, in terms of what's already on LinkedIn, and it's refreshing that like that ends up creating like a massive, because everyone else wants to be acting that way themselves and stuff in some way, shape, or form, right? And not everyone wants to move to the jungle, but everyone has their own version of that that's in them,
Mm-hmm.
right? That they're like a little afraid to do. So then they're just like, they like to like vicariously like enjoy that. And I love to share that with people. And if it can pump, I have a folder full of like, I don't know how many at this point, like screenshots of things people wrote me that are like, you know, range from like, I changed my whole life and my wife and kids. We moved to Costa Rica. We got inspired by what you did, and our life's like way
That's
better now. I
I'm not
get
surprised.
emotional like just saying it. Yeah. Or to
I'm
like
not surprised.
other
And
stuff, right?
look, you've made a choice of serving people and being part of the community, like in the true meaning of it, and helping out and living a good life out of helping out, of
Hmm.
being of service. And what you're doing is of great service. So you're inspiring people. You're reminding people that there's a different way, and that's what your life's about now. So you're clearly serving your purpose, doing what you're doing, and your goal is definitely not to build a sales funnel on LinkedIn. Like it's more to tell your
Yeah.
story and inspire people through it. And I think
Hmm.
it bleeds through. Like we can tell, you're not doing this to serve yourself, right? So
Thank you, bro. Yeah.
but
And in
it's
some way it is too, though. It's like out of service, but like the joy of service. Like I actually feel very happy doing that. You know what I mean? And I feel excited to share. And I want that moment, that feeling and energy of my own excitement to be in my creations, because otherwise, what's the point also, right? Like it's
mhm.
like, you know, I'm not going to be of service to the point of being like a full martyr or something. It's like I kind of enjoy being a martyr as like, because I just like thrusting myself into these interesting adventures and stuff like that. So that ends up happening. But also like I really had to like change my way of thinking on this whole like I always need to be honoring my own joy and stuff like that in the process, right? That's what I realized about the service thing, is that like if you don't have joy in the service, like sure, we're not always fired up about the service. We're tired one day, but like it's not out of a real like heart like service. You know what I mean? Like it's like you should just be happy, like, you know what I mean, doing it, because it's the way you're serving is the way that you're best to serve, which is automatically the thing that you enjoy the most. The thing you enjoy the most, and everyone says this shit, and you can't just take it as a postcard statement and just insert it into your life, and it just like won't work. Like it's just like you have to go and like walk the actual path and like live it and do it. And then all the cliches that you've heard, they'll just all unfold like before your eyes. But like there's no point just trying to grab the cliche at like face value and like journal it down, and then you think you know what I mean? It's like you
Hmm.
have to start. That helps. That gets you towards, but then
Like
you have to like just start living
you can't
that
be an
and doing it.
armchair philosopher. Like philosophy is something you live, and
Yeah, the map is not the territory. Like, get a map to help you, but then go in the territory and see. And then you're like, oh, wait, no, like that curve isn't actually there. And there's a tree that fell there now, and that river is dried up and doesn't actually exist anymore. And you know what I
yeah,
mean? Like,
that's what you're saying. Like if you want to learn about jungle philosophy, come in the jungle. I have no books for
mhm.
you.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And I'm not saying that to be like, I literally like can count on one hand the books I've read cover to cover in my like non-academic life. You know what I mean? And so, and when I was little, I used to read at night. I loved it. I love writing in words. It's just, I'm very much a like, I'll read enough of something and then I'm so inspired and then I'm off creating something. You know what I mean? So I never
Mhm.
like, and the only books have
But
been
it's also
like
that
just really
it's not a
enjoyable.
theoretical philosophy. Like it's not a philosophy that comes with rules for a good life. It's just
Mhm.
a way
Yes.
of living. There's no Ten Commandments of the jungle living, you know, there's so
No.
so there won't be a book about it. Like people are not debating about it. There's no right way or wrong way to do it. It's just
Mhm.
living in that environment will lead you to live that life naturally because
Yep.
of the way your environment is and the context is. So it makes me understand it better just talking about it.
Mhm.
I mean, there's so many things we could talk about still.
Yep.
I feel we've covered a lot of ground already, and
Mhm.
I would have asked you maybe another question about ayahuasca. Is that do you think it's for everyone, or when do you know it's
No,
for you?
you'll feel a calling. You'll just feel drawn to do it for some reason. Some people are drawn to it for healing something that's like been very debilitating in their lives that they haven't been able to remedy in any other way. They've kind of exhausted the gamut of available medicine, and so you get a lot of people like that who will go and seek out, something off the beaten path that has a lot of efficacy and thousands of years of usage and could really help. And seems to really facilitate with a lot of evidence these like miraculous transformations of healing. So that's one motivation. But then there's also people who sort of are like low key, maybe it's more a mental, emotional layer, like depressed, or you've lost that like soul of your life, or you
You've
just,
lost the way.
there's
Yeah.
something off. Yeah. And, you're really navigating. And for some reason, like that shines to you and speaks to you and seems like there's something that's drawing you like magnetically. Um, and you feel excited, but you have fear and respect and you're kind of nervous about it, but like it's like sparkling to you for some reason. I think that's also a valid calling to follow and things like that. Um, what happens with us is just we're so like spiritually deprived, essentially, in the modern West that like we seek like an extreme reconciliation of that, and we seek extreme experiences to like counteract how extremely deprived we are in a way. And so a lot of people are drawn for the like extremeness of the experiential qualities, right? What visions am I going to see? And I'm going to understand how the universe works and have an enlightened, epiphany, right? That may happen, that may not happen, right? And that's not the point. The connection to the divine is the point, but the experience itself, you're not just doing it for the aesthetics of and again, it's you can enjoy something. There's no reason not to enjoy, right? But I'm just saying, like those who are trying to do it as some attraction ride, like at Wonderland or something, right? That's, what's happening, right? A little bit. And I also think that's not altogether bad, and that ends up getting more of the web to just build and weave that's being created, right? These medicines have
Mhm.
existed in part of the earth for a long time, and they're coming back online in a big way and in a new way. People didn't used to always drink it themselves. The maestro would, and they would use it as a diagnostic tool to understand what's going on with the person. Now people want to drink it themselves because that's become the new way, and that's helping heal people and it's helping evolve the consciousness. So it's happening. Um,
Is there a risk for a
so
negative encoding happening during a ceremony, like some sort of a
under the right,
PTSD following uh, a
so
ceremony?
it's the important thing is to be working with professionals, right? So the same way if you were going to go to a hospital or something like that, you want to have that level of discernment, about where and with who you're going to work with. And as long as those things are genuine, like initiated, trained from a lineage, professionals, then you're going to be completely safe. Nothing's going to go wrong. It's not going to be an easy experience necessarily, right? But like you're not at risk, right?
Okay.
You're going to be screened ahead of time about medications and family history. It's going to be like a proper doctor screening for your intake if it's a professional, right? Or not always to that level with professionals who are more sort of like just like people like here, you could find a couple who's 86 and 79 or 82, and they're like veterans of this. And like they're not gonna like give you a whole medical intake, but they're gonna make sure like you didn't do this and you prepared properly and stuff like that, right? They would also be good experts to work with. It doesn't need to be a highly decorated facility or stuff. It can be a humble to people in their home or something, right? But you're less likely to find that yourself at all,
Hmm.
right? It's just like you'd have to adventure deep and everything. So yeah, at on the other side of things, yes, if the people are not trained, are not, holding safe space because they're electing to do this before they've been deemed and initiated by the medicine to be someone who's capable of doing this, like a doctor who just did 1 year and is ready to do surgery or something, then those are unsafe, right? So, and those can be extremely unsafe. You know what I mean? So it's not to create fear about shamans or all this, but it's to say be discerning and treat it like a health investment that the same way you would for any other sort of medical health stuff, right? And if you do that, all good. And then how do you know fully if they're, well, ask them about their training. How many diets have they done? How much time have they spent in diet? How many ceremonies have they done roughly? How many years have they done this? Like, but there's some people they're like, oh, I've been working with the medicine for 10 years. But maybe in those 10 years, when you press deeper, they've been going to the jungle once a year for 1 month at a time for 10 years. So they've actually worked for 10 months with the medicine, not 10 years. You know what I mean? But there's a lot of like people who throw this stuff around and you know what I mean? Um, so again, qualified people,
So you're
qualified
working with
process
a qualified
for your
ayahuasca
safety.
arrows.
Of course, yeah, and that's really important and something to take your time with. And when I showed up here new, something for me to get to know the people and take my time with before just kind of thrusting in one direction or another, right? So that's very, very important. Mm, 100%. But the efficacy, like, and the safety, right? It's been studied by modern Western scientific, bodies. I'm not sure exactly who did this study, but you could find it. There's a valid study out there, and it's like it finds that the most dangerous thing was the riskiest thing when it was done in good hands was someone might fall over when they were walking if they were like leaving the ceremony or going to the bathroom or if they stood up or something, right? So that's like your
Physical
bigger
harm.
risk that was found, right? So I mean that could happen if you had a few too many beers or something, right? Not that those are at all related, but just to say things that people do every day that
Hmm.
is much more dangerous, right? So yeah.
Yeah. So, question I like to ask, and that's my last question. We're gonna
Okay.
we're gonna slowly wrap it up. Um, a question I like to ask is if you could write something on a billboard that everybody in the world could see, what would you write on it? Or what would you put on it?
So right now, what I would put on it is life is a gift, not a test.
Like it.
That's like so important to my own life and experiencing more joy. And that goes with what our conversation was about. And it's calibrated well for like the type of people who will be listening to this and everything. It's like life is a gift, it's not a test. Like you're not being evaluated for every little thing that you do. And if you don't do that correctly, and if you don't achieve the most and your business isn't as successful, you won't be this or that, or you won't be seen as loved or this or that. It's like, no,
Mm-hmm.
none of that. Like, you know what I mean? It's like, that's not the case at all. Another big one for me is nature rewards courage. So that's like on my shirt somewhere. Hopefully it showed, but, and that's like saying that, like, when you reach in your heart and you summon that like jaguar courage that's inside each and every one of us, the energy you put out by doing that, it creates some form of like ripple that goes out, and then everything comes back behind you like a helpful wave that's helping you. Like the all of nature, I view it as nature. You could call it the universe. There's a quote
Mm-hmm.
like, at the moment of commitment, the universe conspires to assist you. That's very similar. But me, it's
Mm-hmm.
not just commitment, it's courage, right? It's courage. Um, and in French, right, we know it's courage, is it? Or what,
Courage.
how do we say it? Yeah.
Courage.
And co
Same word.
and the corazón in Spanish, corazón, it's your heart, right? And that's what courage is. It's a heart of a lion, the heart of a jaguar, right? It comes from the heart. It's not bravado or even bravery. Those are like
Yeah, it's not
different
ego.
things.
It's
No, it's just like your heart
actually like
leaps forward.
getting out of the way somehow.
Yeah, it is that. It is that. And it's letting your heart speak and lending it your voice too, and letting
Mm-hmm.
that be heard and not afraid to say it. So life is a gift, not a test, and
I
nature
love it,
rewards
man.
courage. Yeah.
So we'll put all
Yeah.
the contact information in the link
Cool.
in the notes. Um, People can reach out to you over LinkedIn.
Yep.
And man, I don't know when, but it's gonna happen. I'm gonna come and see you in the jungle one day, and I'm gonna be so excited about it. Um, and let's hope we can chat again on this show. I have more follow-up questions for you, and I'd love to have an update later on how things are going for you. So
Mhm.
let's stay in touch. Thank
100%
you.
happy to come on again, Leo. 100% love talking to you. You have a really great way of like holding space, and like you're a very calming presence to you that makes it easy to have a deep conversation too,
Thank
which I
you.
think is awesome. And you ask amazing questions. So, and of course, it'll be amazing. We'll be here in the jungle whenever it calls to you. And we can do some really cool adventurous stuff and drink some tea and have some fun with creative ideas and just enjoy life and stuff like that. So and I got excited about your log cabin vision and the fact you're feeling called to the woods, the forest. Like I think there's definitely something there for you. And I could see like certain people, they have that look in their eyes. There's like a certain look about them that's like, oh, that's a nature person. We're all nature people. We are nature. But
Hmm.
like there's a certain like glow that they have to me that's like that's a earthy based nature person kind of, and I can see that from you and like your eyes and so yeah, you have that like salt of the earth quality of you, right? So I think there must be something to follow, and I'm sure you'll have a life that's much more intertwined with that as you go, or you already I didn't know about the log cabins, like that's so cool. So let's see how that all evolves, and I definitely want to come to like your log cabins at some point too. So
It'd be an
yeah.
honor to have you.
Yeah.
Thanks for your time. Thanks for coming on the show. It was great.
Thank you, Leo.
And we'll stay in touch. So, another great conversation ends. I hope it brought you tremendous value. If it did, please like, subscribe, or leave us a 5-star review on Spotify. We'd love to read your comments. Feel free to leave one. And also, you can contact our guests. Usually, their information is included in the description. So, that's it. That's all. See you very soon, my friends.